name is Jeff Bernstein. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Office of Arts, and it's a pleasure to have you here this evening. As Mary was saying, you are just so brave and dedicated and very much appreciated. This is such a fun event. This is the third time we've done the Bard's Confession, and I always get so much from hearing these stories. Last summer, I don't know how many of you were there, but I was personally sobbing. Oh, good. And I think it's a lot, in part, due to Mary Roberts, who has been our host for all of our storytelling. And there's no one like her. Who holds this thing together, and it keeps all of the storytellers hopefully in one big bundle trying to actually get here tonight. It can be a comedy of errors, and she's fantastic. And she brings out just a quality in these storytellers that I'm not sure anyone else really does. So she is hugely appreciated, and we love having her do this. And I think you're in for a real treat this evening. So before we start, I always need to and want to thank our sponsors. We are very grateful to Ginger and Baker for hosting us in this really lovely room. Isn't this the gorgeous room and snow, and it's going to be a lovely night. We'd also like to thank the Fort Collins Public Media for the use of their cameras and their assistance in training our interns. It's a great additional educational thing we get to do is help young people understand the art of videography and being involved in that aspect of our festivals. So I will have the opportunity to turn it over to Mary, but please also make sure that you take your program home, take some time, look at all the other events. WinterFest goes on through February 10th. There are some incredible artists, musicians, speakers that will be here this week, and you really don't want to miss them. So we'll see a lot of you at other things.
Thank you, Jenna. I always say this, but I'm shorter than I think I am. I just want to explain what's happening tonight. Who here has not attended a storytelling event? One? Oh, okay. Well, most of you know what's going to happen, and you all know the Moth Radio Hour, correct? So we try and copy that. They have 20 minutes or so. They're experienced comedians or authors. They've been doing this for a long time, and there are some people who are amateurs. These are amateurs, and I put out the call for this. It was probably September, October, and I coached probably. This is not a complaint. It may sound like it though. 10 or 11 storytellers, and one after another had to bail for good reason. So I wasn't really angry with them, but I was a bit upset when one of them bailed 2 weeks ago, and I said, okay, I'll tell a story, which I don't like to do when I'm the MC, because that's extra work for me, and I don't like to do extra work. But anyway, so I appreciate you being here once again. All of our storytellers have had a really, I don't say difficult, but it's a struggle to get to the heart of the story. I teach at OSHA Lifelong Learning Institute. Any of you know that? Everyone thinks I'm saying OSHA. So I'm going to OSHA to teach people about story. No, it's OSHA. And it's at CSU, and people over 55 take classes there, though you don't have to be. I teach a class called The Heart of Story, Why Story Matters. And it's a lot of fun, and actually, I had 2 people from that class as storytellers tonight, but one of them had to go. She had a really good reason. So we got one tonight. Not that when people bail, they don't have a good reason, but they don't. I'm just trying to be nice. Anyway, so we did have one bail last night, so that was fun. Anyway, that means you get home earlier tonight, so I arranged that for you guys. So, what is story? You come and you listen to this.
It's just right with the camera's in.
And what I teach is something kind of basic. Let me
Is that a
explain it
comment
to a
about the
guy
back of my
who's at
head?
this lecture I taught at Osher. And he said, look, I have a bunch of stories from my hometown, and it's unusual that there's so many famous people from my hometown. So I documented that, and I have all these stories, and they're friends of mine, and he said, so that's why I'm here. I want to put it into some kind of, like big story. And I said, okay, so what's the conflict? You were jealous of them and festered for years, and then, you shot one of them. I don't know, let's have a conflict. And he said, he said, there's no conflict. I just really enjoy knowing these people. And I said, okay, so how did it change you? So it didn't change me at all. I get to hang out with celebrities. And I said, well, what's the message for the audience? And he said, well, no message. I just want people to know I know famous people. I said, well, you don't have a story. You have a series of anecdotes. And of course he got, I don't think I insulted him. I think he took it as an insult. He certainly didn't sign up for my class. So. Anyway, but I mean, it's like that. What story is? So tonight we're going to hear some stories about conflict, how we changed because of it, and why this matters to you. And your job is to listen. It's open heart, big mind, sit there and enjoy it. You can judge us later when you leave. But there are some tough stories here tonight, and they are going to trust you to hear it, and then you have to trust us to tell the truth. So we're going to tell the truth as best we can. So I'm the first storyteller, so I'm going to introduce myself. And the first storyteller is, hold on. I go first so I can have a drink at intermission. Okay, so when I was 13 years old, I was in the 8th grade at St. Joseph's Elementary School in Needham, Massachusetts. Sister Ann Patricia had given us assignment to write our autobiography and to compete for best essay. We're 13 years old. We have nothing to say that's interesting. Unless, if it is interesting, it's forbidden by the Catholic Church or forbidden by our parents to tell anybody. So I wanted to win this contest, and I knew I had to do something different. So I wrote a satire about sharing a room with my twin brother Billy, who's sitting right here. I railed against him for taking more than his share of nutrients in space, like a pre-birth feminist. I knew that. I swore revenge when we got out of this, what I called a suffocating prison. And I also wrote, Billy, I also wrote that I was going to do bad things and frame it on Billy. So I was really thrilled, but also a little terrified to hand this essay over to Sister Ann Patricia. I thought, she's going to either love it or she's going to report me to the principal for some, I have to go to the principal's office. But I was really terrified because I was afraid I was going to win the contest. And the prize was a blue ribbon and the opportunity to read your essay out loud to the class. Well, I was a stutterer, and there was no way I was going to read this goddamn essay in front of anybody. The sound of my voice made me cringe. So the day came, and Sister Ann Patricia stands up, and she says, and the winner is, of course, Mary Rhodes. And I remember distinctly, I felt like I was going to faint, and I don't think I'd ever fainted before. Unfortunately, I didn't feel any joy in my success. I just had this feeling I wanted to run out of the room screaming, but then I didn't want to be noticed, so I wanted to scream. And I really prayed for the 8 or 9 Murphy boys to one of them pull the damn fire alarm. They did that on a regular basis. And I also thought, I imagined that everyone, all of the students in the class, had this inner groaning when they heard my name announced, because they would be subjected to a torturous 20 minutes of me halting and blocking and yes, spitting. Stutterers know it makes people uncomfortable. But then Sister Ann Patricia speaks up and says, in a way too excited voice, and she says, this essay is so funny that I'm going to read it out loud myself. She didn't fool anybody, and the shame and humiliation was still there, but there was also this flickering of love for this tiny little nun. I think she was tiny, but I think I was too. And I also, it was the first time I remember ever experienced pure compassion directed at me. Stuttering dictated my life. Every night I'd go to bed and I'd pray to the Virgin Mary to intercede on my behalf and ask Jesus, nay, beg Jesus to heal me. I also called on the boys, as backup, St. Jude, St. Anthony, and my buddy, St. Francis. But it didn't work. So my mom had me go to Boston Children's Hospital. I was 15 years old for speech therapy, and they said, oh gosh, it's too late. But you should go up to the 7th floor of the hospital where the psychiatrists had their offices. So I did, and just an aside, my doctor's name is Dr. Camus. So I was reading The Perfect Stranger at the time. So for the first few months, I didn't speak a word in these sessions. I was afraid I'd stutter too much. But we both smoked, and so every once in a while I'd ask him for a light. I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to make audiences laugh and cry. Instead, Billy became the actor. I didn't mind, because by then I had passed the point where I thought I could actually do this. I majored in theater my first year in college, and we were doing a production of Marat Sade. Now, I wanted to be Marat Sade's mother, who was a stutterer, right? And the director said he needed an actor who could stutter on cue and not randomly. So I turned out to be a shitty stutterer, and I gave up then and there. So I transferred to CSU. And a year or so later, I was living in this house with a bunch of people, and one night I told them that my uncle had offered to send me to the Stuttering Institute in Virginia for a month-long retreat where they promised great results. But I didn't want to go because I was afraid I'd stutter too much. That's ridiculous. But it is what it is. So while I was discussing it, one of the guys who was there, who hung around a lot, he says, and I'm not kidding, he says to me, "Oh no, you can't get rid of your stutter. It's so cute." And I don't know what I actually said, but now it's like, was that intended as a compliment? An insult? A careless expression expression of the male gaze. I had spent my entire life agonizing every time I had to speak a sentence that had more than 3 words in it. Cute. And the next day, I took my bike and went over to the speech therapy department. And I decided I'm going to get serious. So I had this great therapist. And one day she said to me, I need you, and you know, it's up to you, to speak in front of a speech therapy class about stuttering. And I agreed. You know, I was 20 years old. It was damn time. So you know, I thought, okay, it'll be a nice intimate affair, kind of like tonight, you know. But instead, it was like this stadium-size, you know, lecture hall. I had a lectern and a mic. And, I wasn't that prepared. I wasn't going to give a speech. I didn't have a speech. Instead, the teacher said, why don't we just have some questions? It's fine with me. And most of the questions was a version of this. Do you stutter when you're drunk or high? And so, you know, I had to answer that about 5 times. No, I don't. So afterwards, a gal came up to me and she took me aside and she said, I'm a stutterer and I haven't told my boyfriend. Now, I could have been snarky and said something, but I didn't. And she says, goes on, we've been together a year, and she says, I've done all the tricks we stutterers know. We drop stuff as a distraction. We fake a sneeze or a cough, a prolonged cough. We point. And everybody looks in the other direction. We yawn, we swallow. I even had this, like, it's called a harumpa. I had my own version of it. All just to hide the fact that we can't speak at the moment. It's exhausting. And then she says, I'm afraid my boyfriend will break up with me if I tell him I stutter. This is what stutterers think about themselves. We have a problem, and we assume that everyone else thinks it's a fatal flaw, like we do. Reality doesn't matter, and you know what else doesn't matter? Telling us that all these famous people stutter. No need, no need. And it also doesn't matter that you tell us our stutter is cute. It's not only, it's also insulting, by the way. So a few months ago, I listened to an interview on NPR with a black male professor of political science. He stated that being a black man in America doesn't compare to the trauma and fear he felt as a stutterer. It shocked me, but I understood. So in 2013, long after that, I was with a group of people and we were educating the people about the connection between puppy mills and pet stores. And I had 3 terriers at the time. One of them I had gotten at the pet store. I'm just sorry, right in front of telling you I'm sorry. And so I felt really guilty about it. So I felt if I shared my experience that that other people would be inspired to adopt, not shop. So I submitted a proposal to Ignite for Commons. If you don't know what that is, it's you get on stage in front of 1 million people and you got 5 minutes and 20 slides. It's disconcerting. It was accepted. I did okay. But when they accepted it, for a moment I thought, I felt like I was 13 years old again. And I had won that essay contest. And I thought, why did I do this? I could have not done this and felt safe and comfortable in the audience where I'd feel jealous of everyone who got up on stage with nary a self-defeating thought. But I did okay, and then they sent me an email with a link that says, click here to watch your performance. Well, that was never gonna happen. And I never clicked it. few months later, may have been a year, I don't know, I can't remember. I submitted a story to the Coloradoan Storytellers Project. One or two of you may have been there. It was Outdoor Misadventures. And it was a story about a hike that I took at Conundrum Hot Springs in October with a guide that went terribly wrong. And I did okay, and once again, they sent me the link and said, hey, look at your performance. That's not gonna happen. So a year later, I clicked the link. It may have been 2 years. And it was pretty good. The audience was engaged, people were laughing or sighing in solidarity. I had lots of ums and hesitations, and I kept stepping away from the mic. I don't know, I was a little afraid of it or something. And I even harassed a little kid in the front row. It was, well, he laughed a little too hard at one of my very vulnerable moments. So he was like 10 years old, and I felt bad. And anyway, so, you know, I thought, I'm really proud of this woman who was finally speaking. And you know, when I listened to it, I thought of ways I need to improve instead of turning away in shame. I wish I could go back to that 13-year-old girl in the 8th grade to tell her, no worries, you're going to be able to speak, even though it's 50 years in the future. I would probably lie about the time frame, like 10 years, maybe 5. But you know, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm a moderate stutterer. You know, with a little effort and courage early on, I may have overcome this a long time ago. Instead, I did not face those old and useless fears that stopped me from doing what I wanted. And I regret that. Sure, you're gonna say better late than never, but 50 years is a long time. And maybe I had to do this path. Maybe, you know, all of us, in order to get to where we wanted to go, have to take this journey. And my only takeaway for you is don't do what I did. Don't wait 50 years. Do what you're here to do now. And find your own stage today. Well, actually, tomorrow would be good too. Thank you. MC hat bad. So if you know any stutterers, though, you know, I don't know what to tell you, seriously. So we have, up next is Leandra Foster, who tells a heartbreaking story. It was really, we worked on this, and she just stood up bravely and said, I'm doing it. I said, okay, Leandra.
So that is my son at 8 months old, crying, obviously. And that was only 12 seconds of listening to that scream. So there were times when I would be changing his diaper with him screaming like that. And the blood would be pounding in my ears, and my heart would be racing, and my hands would be shaking as I tried to get his diaper changed as quickly as I possibly could, to throw him as gently as I could into his crib and run out of his room, slamming the door behind me, racing down the stairs and bursting through the front door to run out into the front yard and scream as loudly as I could just to cover the sounds of his screams. We lived 45 minutes out of town, which means 45 minutes to the grocery store, to story time, to visit a friend, just to talk to an adult. Which means that when we were home alone together, we were alone. Now, a baby cries to tell you that it needs something, that it needs to be fed, or it needs its diaper changed, or it needs a snuggle, or just to sleep. But I nursed him, I changed his diaper, I laid him down, I snuggled him, and sometimes still he would scream that scream. There was several times, but one that sticks out in my mind the most, as I was sitting in the rocking chair holding this tiny baby of mine with postnatal hormones coursing through my veins and tears streaming down my face, that I just wondered if I could give him up. If only society wouldn't look down on me for choosing to have this baby and then not being able to do it. If he wouldn't think that he wasn't loved or wasn't wanted. Because it wasn't his fault. We just weren't cut out to be parents. I wasn't ready to give up my life, and my husband, who was always at work, obviously wasn't ready to give up his. And I had a friend who couldn't conceive. I was sure that she would take him, and she would love him, and I'd still be able to see him. And in fact, I know she would. Because when she asked me how motherhood was going, I told her my thoughts. When he was about a month and a half old, we had Easter, and my cousin, who already had kids, looked at me and she said, "Do you understand now why they have to tell you to walk away before you shake a baby?" And I got it. At that point, I already got it. And in fact, at that same time, there was a woman here who drove her minivan into the lake with her children strapped into their car seats behind her. And I got it. I completely understood what drove her to that point. I'm not saying I condoned it, but I got it. And I just hoped that I would get help before it got to that point. So my son is almost 6 now, and he still screams like that. The pitch is not as high, but the volume has not changed. But what I've come to understand is that crying is the sound of healing. It doesn't matter if you're 6 months, 6 years, 36, 106, crying is the sound of healing. And I learned that from my son. Because when I learned the technique of listening, it changed my life. So when my son was about a year old, we had this blissful year that we thought we had the parenting thing figured out. And so we had another one. But during that time, we had friends who ended up locking their 4-year-old daughter in her room for the entire day. And they would check on her periodically and give her the opportunity to apologize, which she stubbornly refused. And so she stayed in her room all day long. And my husband and I wondered aloud to each other how bad it had to be to lock your 4-year-old in the room all day. And we had another set of friends who took everything out of their 3-year-old daughter's room because she was throwing and breaking everything. And again, we wondered how bad it had to be. But what I've come to learn is never ask questions to which you don't want the answer. Because when my son was almost 4, the tantrums started again. Only this time they were bigger. And they continued to get bigger and bigger. My daughter was only about 1 at the time, so just learning to walk. And my son started yanking things from her. He started screaming at her. He started knocking her down as she's learning to walk. And I tried everything. I tried timeout. I tried spanking. I tried giving him tasks to change his direction. I tried sending him to his room, but when he wouldn't stay in there, I ended up switching the lock to the outside of the room. And now I had my answer to the first question. And while he was in there, he started throwing things and breaking things. And so we took everything out. And now I had the answer to my second question. And the whole time I was getting angrier and angrier. The rougher he got with his little sister, the rougher I got with him, until it was the point that I was locking myself in my room because I was on the verge of rage, that I didn't trust myself not to hurt this little boy because he was making me so angry when he was hurting his sister. And I found myself yet again wondering if I could give up my kids, because I couldn't force myself to leave my bedroom and check on my children to make sure that they were safe, because I hated being a mom so much. I hated it. I didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted to be done. I didn't want the responsibility. I didn't want this job. And the funny thing about it is that at the same time I was being commended for being such a good mom, that my husband and I were doing things so well and so right because my children are so happy and outgoing and loving, that we were such good parents. And I just kept wondering, if we're the good parents, what the hell is everyone else doing? And that was not good enough for me. This was not okay to bring them into the world and then treat them in this way. So I did ask for help. And around that time, I was recommended the book called Listen. And that book basically says that we set a limit and then we stay with our child as they react. No matter how they react, we stay with them and we let them know that they are safe and that they are loved. And I came to understand that when he was rough with his sister, this was his way of asking for help. He's only 4, and it took me that long to ask for help. How does a 4-year-old ask for help? He pushes his sister. So we have what we call listening time. Listening time can be as benign as me giving him a hug and setting a limit, saying, we speak with kindness in this family. And maybe after a few minutes, instead of resisting the hug, he leans into it. Other times, listening time can literally be hours of him thrashing, kicking, screaming, scratching, biting, hitting, headbutting, anything he can possibly do to get away as I try to hold him, keeping him safe from himself, keeping his sister, me, and our house safe from his antics. But what has come, and what usually comes from the end of listening time, is that he returns to his happy, loving self. And I'm so thankful for this because he started kindergarten this past fall. And the first month of kindergarten was really rough. In that first month, we had major listening times. It was 2 hours of this physical fighting and struggling, and it was happening regularly. If it wasn't happening every night, you could count on it every Saturday morning. But what finally came of it was that I found out some big kid had told him that he didn't have private parts. Now, if you're like me, I sat there for a second and said, what? And then I realized that my son had made it appropriate for my ears, that that's probably not what the big kid said. And the big listening times continued, and then I found out that this big kid told my son that he was going to kill him at his house. So my son didn't have a safe place. If he's not safe at home, where is he safe? And then a few weeks after that, as we're still going through this, that you can tell he's terrified, I found out that this kid told my son that he was going to kill me. And my son couldn't even utter the words because I think he thought that it would happen if he said it. And the thing is, without listening time, I would never have known any of this. He would have still been pushing his sister and hitting her and screaming at her and yanking toys, and I would have sent him to his room to be by himself with these big feelings and made him to deal with it on his own. And so through this, I really understand that crying is the sound of healing. Because when we allow ourselves the space to cry, we let the big feelings out instead of shoving them down again, only to have them come back up over and over and over again when we least expect it. And so through crying and listening, I now have the opportunity to hold my son again. Only now, when I rock him, he hugs me back. And I know that I can provide a safe and calm environment for him, and that it's okay for him to cry, and it's okay for me and all of us to cry. Thank you.
Thank you, Leandra. Never going to bitch about having 3 damaged terriers again. That was great, and I appreciate it. Okay, I forget who's next. Sarah. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. B. Hunick. Sarah B. Hunick. And it's a story that it gets a little scary. So we're all safe here, right? So, but it has a happy ending, as we all have happy endings, because that's, at the end of every story, we need a bit of an uplift for the audience. When you leave them bummed out, it doesn't work as well. So, Sarah.
Well, I'm not sure.
I know.
So excuse me, I might need a little water first. It's the late 70s. I'm 18 and I'm living with my parents in a small rural community in the high desert outside of LA. My parents had moved us to the high desert to get out of LA where the crime rate was going up. I'm in my bed one night reading and I hear a noise outside of my bedroom window. And I can't tell what the noise is. I'd never heard it before. My bedroom's on where we have a 1-story house, and my bedroom's on the front of the house. And there are 2 windows, 2 sets of windows in my bedroom, including one over my bed. So I just think that there's something wild, a wild animal foraging outside of my bedroom, and I think nothing else of it. Several nights later, I hear scuffling and pounding on the roof of the house over my bedroom. I'm sleepless, and I don't want to turn the lights out because I'm afraid, but I'm also a little creeped out that I feel like something's spying on me. The next day, I asked my mom if she's heard the noises, and she had. And at first, we don't take it seriously. But then the noises continue, the scuffling and the pounding. My father, a retired LA cop, was working nights as a security guard. So he stayed home one night, and he too heard the noises. Soon my parents are convinced that I'm being stalked because the noises are primarily over my bedroom and happening primarily at night. We begin to feel like we're under siege. I started putting blankets over my window and I tried to will myself to sleep at night. We were worried that he would break in at any moment. And one night I walked into the living room and my mom was sitting in her rocking chair, a loaded gun in her lap with the safety off. Then the police got involved, and they did a stakeout, but they were unable to catch the stalker. It felt like it would never end. My parents were becoming exhausted, and we were frustrated. And even against all the things they'd ever taught me about gun safety, the two of them on separate nights, through open windows or doors, shot outside at this guy trying to scare him off. I felt helpless and hopeless. If the police and my parents couldn't save me, then who could? Finally, we moved from that small town that had felt so safe growing up, never knowing who my stalker was. We had heard later that it might have been a troubled young man who lived up the street from us. I went off to college, and my experience haunted my thoughts and my dreams. I had a reoccurring dream that I was back in the house, and it was dark, and there were windows all around me, and I felt like there was something dangerous outside of that room. I asked my parents if I could get therapy, but they were both former emergency workers, and they thought that it would stigmatize me, and so they said no. So, feeling ashamed and weak, I compartmentalized my anxiety and learned to cope. 7 years later, I'm in my bathtub in my apartment in a small university town in the Midwest. It's after midnight, and I've been packing all day to move. The apartment complex is empty because I hear no sounds during the day because it's in between semesters. But I'm startled and surprised to hear a noise at my front door. And I think, I haven't heard anything all day, and it's after midnight, so why would anybody be visiting me? I didn't expect it. So I bolted out of the bathtub and wrapped a towel around me, and I crept down the hallway, and I looked around the corner of the hallway to my front door, and I had latched the hook, the safety lock on the door, but I hadn't locked the door. And the door was open a crack, and there's the hand inside the door trying to unbolt the bolt. And there's somebody, he's saying a woman's name over and over, and it's not my name, I don't know who she is, and I say, she doesn't live here. And he keeps saying the name and trying to unhook the bolt. I know he's gonna come through the door, and so I dive for my landline phone, and he breaks the door down and lunges at me, knocking me to my knees. I was able to dial 911, I screamed and dialed 911, but he ripped the phone cord out of the wall. I screamed again even though nobody could hear me. As he turned, he knocked me over on my back and started slapping my face back and forth. I don't know this guy, never seen him in my life. He's about my size. He doesn't smell like alcohol, he doesn't look like he's on drugs, and he doesn't say anything. Well, here's where I'd like to thank my high school PE teacher for the 2 weeks of self-defense classes that she had. She taught us on mats inside the women's gym that Title IX built. She said, gouge him in the eyes, knee him in the crotch, do whatever you can, bite him, just do whatever you can to survive. And that was Mrs. McKay. So there I am lying on my back, and suddenly I get really mad, and I lunge up and I bite him on the shoulder. And he looks surprised, and he jumps up and he runs out, leaving me beaten and battered, anger flowing out of me and fear replacing it. Then I'm naked and vulnerable, and I run to the door and I lock it in case he returns. I dress and I take and load the .22 caliber handgun my father had given me that I never wanted, but now I was appreciated that I had. He'd ripped the phone out of the wall, so I couldn't call anybody. We didn't have cell phones. And I knew I needed to get out of the apartment. So, in a scene reminiscent of Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs, I put the gun in my hand and I go out and I walk with my hand shaking up an unlit hallway, and I sprint to the safety of my car. I do report the attack to the police that night because I didn't want anybody else to be attacked. And I shouldn't have bothered because they didn't believe I didn't know my attacker. And this made me really, really angry. The bruises on my face and the carpet burns on my knees eventually heal, but emotionally and psychologically, I don't. People have asked me if the stalker and the attacker were the same person, and I really can't say. These were events that were 2 states and 7 years apart, so I don't think so. But I will tell you the effect on me was the same. Nights I was sleepless with insomnia, and I would huddle in my bed in the middle of my room, away from windows. Living in fear, I moved multiple times, trying to find a safe space. My life went on, but I still suffered bouts of insomnia and anxiety. And it didn't help that I worked on a high-pressure job for the next 5 years in broadcast news. Sirens would go off and my adrenaline would go up. My nervous system was always on high alert. But then I relocated here to Fort Collins, and I left the news business. I went to therapy, and I also saw my doctor who prescribed anxiety drugs and sleep aids. And the insomnia eased, and so did the anxiety. Then 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with metastatic melanoma. That 10 years ago, my doctor told me would be a terminal diagnosis. But now, with therapy, I had a chance to live. I started juggling infusion therapy every 3 weeks with a 3-hour drive to Denver daily. Facing my mortality, I was stressed, and I feared I would go back into the insomnia, anxiety. I didn't want to go back down that dark path. And a friend of mine recommended a sound-aided meditation app that she used to help her deal with life stresses. I downloaded the app and began scrolling through the sounds and the offerings, and I found a composition that helped me go to sleep at night. Encouraged by this, I started a daily meditation practice. I would get up in the morning and put my headphones on, I'd launch the app, and I would meditate. Sometimes I'd meditate for 30 minutes, sometimes less than that, but I was consistent. These calming sounds really helped to ease my anxiety and my fears. And as I completed each session, I was feeling stronger both psychologically and emotionally. Late last December, I'm meditating on my meditation cushions. I have blankets wrapped around me against the chill, and I'm coming out of a 30-minute meditation, and I realize I'm crying. Tears are streaming down my face. And it's in part because I'm grateful. I'm so grateful, but I'm also grieving. That day before that, blood tests and my cancer doctor confirmed that I'm still free of cancer. But that night, my beloved cat, Lewis, who became gravely ill and he died in my arms. These dual emotions that I felt with meditation made me realize what a gift meditation is. Now, at night, sometimes when my subconscious demons come out and fear threads through my body and adrenaline goes up and my heart rate goes up, I can reach for my headphones and my app to calm me. And I can now say that what had wounded me, sounds, are now healing me. Thank you.
Well, you can see what we have to go through when we do these stories. This just isn't calm. They have to go, I force them to cry and go through a difficult time, but they come out with these awesome stories. So it's well worth it, ladies, right? Just asking. So we're gonna take a break. We have 3. We're gonna have is it a 10-minute break? 'Cause we're gonna try and get you all home early. This was all planned, by the way. So 10 minutes, 10 minutes good for everybody, and then we'll have 2 more, and then a special surprise. So have fun, don't show, get yourself a drink. Hello, everyone, take a seat. So, isn't this fun? Isn't it? No. Yeah. Oh, it's sad stories, but someone told me in the Osher class, it said, why are the stories also about pain and suffering? Well, yeah, they're the best stories. I mean, what about the trip I took down the Grand Canyon and we got high and had a great time, and then Nixon resigned. I didn't We went out to Grand Canyon at 70. When did he resign? Anyone know? 4. And when we went, he was still the president, and we came out 21 days later, and he was no longer the president. I mean, an interesting anecdote. Well, what kind of story is that? How high did you get? You know, that's about it. So, that's not a story. I couldn't make it one, I could think of something. But anyway, so we have 2 more storytellers. And our next one is Deanna May, which is such a pretty name. I've been calling her something else all this time. Anyway, I didn't know. But she's got a story and she jumped in at the last minute. So I'm very grateful that she has, or I would have to tell another story about Billy. And I would. But anyway, so Deanna.
I'm short.
Yeah. Are you shorter than me?
They say when you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags. Hi, I'm Deanna, and I'm a recovering rose-colored glasses wearer. Positivity was my jam. I didn't want to feel anything else but good feelings. Honestly, I didn't know how to handle anything else but mainly pleasant emotion. Happy, calm, inspiration, love, so much so that people considered me a real-life, walking, talking Disney princess. That is, until I played one on stage. In 2011, I got married to a man I knew for less than a year. He was a hard worker, fascinating, and quite charming. I was ready to live out my fairy tale dream. We were happy, but there were many red flags that I wasn't able to see. You know, with my rose-colored glasses on. I would make excuses for the way he treated me and for others. He didn't mean it. He'll cool down. I'll never forget when his sister came out to visit and meet our 3-month-old baby. We were living in a 500 square foot house in Beacon, New York. It was so sweet. However, I was shocked how he spoke to her. I just remember feeling off, unsafe, and ashamed. I can't remember the dialogue that happened, but I remember just going back and forth, and I'm just shocked. It was also clear proof, now looking back, that I made sure not to trigger my husband, the ticking time bomb, otherwise I would be dealing with a battle. So I kept my mouth shut. Honestly, it reminded me of my childhood walking on eggshells. This abusive cycle only got worse as the years went on, and I felt trapped. Then, in 2015, while performing in Shrek the Musical, I was backstage in my dressing room when it was announced that Fort Collins Children's Theater would be doing Beauty and the Beast the following year. Belle was my dream role. As a child, I yearned to sing the Belle song, wear the yellow dress, and have a nose in my book. That was already true. I saw Beauty and the Beast performed on Broadway and as many local productions as I could, and always knew my time would come. A castmate who also wanted to play Belle said how much she wanted that role, and that role was made for her. I said loud enough for her to hear, not if I can help it. Have a little edge in competition when I want something. I got the part. As Belle, I found myself saying or even yelling back at the Beast, "Don't be ridiculous. You can't go around ordering people to be hungry. It doesn't work like that." And calling him out as a bully. My favorite one was, "And you should learn to control your temper." I told my director that I feared the kids would not like me as Belle. She knew my story, and as a friend, she looked at me and simply asked, why? It wasn't like the watered-down Disney animated version we're all used to. I grew up practicing, and so this Belle was using her voice. As the actor embodying Belle, I felt uneasy saying these things because in reality, I was the one who felt uncomfortable standing up to my beast. I knew my husband would be in the audience. He would hear these words coming out of my mouth. What would he be thinking? After 5 sold-out shows with standing ovations, I was on cloud 9. However, I was quickly snapped back into reality at home. We fought after that whole beautiful weekend, after my cast party. It was so crushing. Again, I can't remember the dialogue, but I just remember feeling like that wasn't worth it. My whole life was crumbling, but I was staying afloat. At the time, we were living and working on a farm. So I was a performer and a farmer. We were packing up to actually leave the dusty old farmhouse when a friend who worked closely with us on the farm praised my performance and said she could see why I played Belle so well, having my husband as my muse. I felt caught, seen, and acknowledged. I remember heaving a sigh and just nodding. It took me 2 years after playing Belle to finally stand up and leave my own beast. It didn't happen overnight. A friend helped me identify terms like abuse, gaslighting, narcissism. We'd have phone calls in secret to talk about it, and I finally felt someone saw me and heard me. I was shaking, as I am now. And I finally said, it's time. I don't know where I'd be if I didn't embody Belle. Just like practicing for the part, I now practice speaking up, advocating for myself, and creating healthy boundaries. The sound of my own voice has been healing and transformational. I won't be shut down, or muted, so speak up. The only person able to silence me is me. Because, I'm not this one, right? I'm supposed to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So the only person able to silence me is me, because there's been a change in me, a kind of moving on, the one I used to be, I still depend upon. For now I realize that good can come from bad, that may not make me wise, but oh, it makes me glad, and I never thought I'd leave behind my childhood dreams, but I don't mind, for now I love the world I see. No change of heart, a change in me.
I bet you didn't expect that. I want to thank Deanna for jumping in this past week. Sometimes we work on these stories for a couple months. And so when you have to do it like that, you do it, you know, it's tough. And so if any of you ever want to try it, just give me a call. And be prepared for some tears in the Starbucks over on Drake. So we have our last storyteller. I told you I can get you out of here early. I'm sure you don't mind. This is, she's one of my favorite storytellers. We keep threatening to do a one-woman show. She would direct me, and I would talk about my 13 rescue dogs. And I think we may do it. It'd be pretty silly, but funny and moving, and, you know, deep. So Marge Hahn, see, we all have these childhood issues, of course, they keep coming up, and why not? You know, they inform who we are today. Marge has this wonderful story, and again, I forced Marge to do this. She said, I can't do it, I'm so busy, and I don't have a story, and I said, oh, wait. And we talked for like 5 minutes, and she just like almost vomits this story out. And I said, well, awesome, we got it. You know, she's a writer, editor, so she kind of knows what she's doing. But we all need a little help, you know? I mean, it's sitting in our heads, we don't know, but if someone says, oh, tell me more. That's how we do it. So, Marge Hahn.
It's always best to start at the beginning. What Glinda the Good Witch says when Dorothy asks her how to find the way back home. So let's start at the beginning. 1973. I try out for the role of Dorothy for our class play, The Wizard of Oz. Mrs. Hughes has me, my best friend, Wendy, and my best friend, Karen, sing one at a time over the rainbow at the front of the classroom. I know, like a second grader knows, innocently, matter-of-factly, that I'm the smartest kid in my class, so who should be Dorothy? Poised before the blackboard, I belt out my best Judy Garland croon. Guess who gets the part? This is interact. Guess who gets the part?
Not you.
Not you. I don't know.
Wendy. Who gets Scarecrow?
Yeah, girl.
Karen. And I? What role do I score? Munchkin. And whose stuffed dog won at this town carnival? Pink Kool-Aid kiss on its snout is Toto. Whose mom volunteers to dye a dozen pillowcases green for the Munchkins' costumes and hangs them to dry on the clothesline for all the world to see? And who says to herself, I can't sing, and begins to live out that sentence, I can't sing, I can't sing. In middle school and high school, I don't try out for chorus. When a Christmas carol floats from a car radio, I stare out the passenger window, crying, mouthing the words. For days after a concert by my favorite folk singer, I ache as if I've lost my true love. And thwarted singer and songwriter that I am, I write poems like this one, No Place Like Home. What girl wouldn't want to be Dorothy, to be spun up high above the dusty gray sky of Kansas with just a basket, a little dog, and a dress? Who wouldn't want to be an instant hero, the pretty lady of the house that landed flat on the wicked witch of the East? Faceless villainess in garish hose and sharp-nosed shoes whose latest crime was picking on nice folks half her size. What girl wouldn't want a fashion makeover from Glinda, the good witch, best dressed in all of Oz, the Lollipop Guild notwithstanding? Her lilting voice, a wise advisor on the long, strange way to the wizard. And who wouldn't want her wanderings underlined with bright yellow bricks, ruby shoes to rescue her quick, restless feet, friends with smarts, heart, and spunk that make a monkey of a dead witch's sister from the West? And who wouldn't want home to be only 3 heel clicks away, the family of your dreams waiting at your bedside? There's no place like home. There's no place like home. I can't sing. I can't sing. How do you commute a life sentence? How do you rewrite that story? In 2010, I tell my Dorothy the Munchkin tale to a musician friend who co-founded the Rocky Mountain Center for Musical Arts. She says, you know, that's a creative trauma. Trauma? I can heal this? I can sing? The one I cry for, the one I ache for, is the unsung me. In 2013, 40 years after that fateful audition, I registered for voice lessons. Feet, knees, abdomen, chest, shoulders, chin, hands. At the piano, my teacher, Faye, takes me through the scales, a half step up at a time, first humming, then open vowing. She shows me the lesson's sheet music, reviewing it measure by measure, marking the tricky notes. I sing T for two, I sing Walking in the Air, I sing my favorite things. Eventually I say, Faye, I want to devote our remaining lessons to Over the Rainbow. And guess what? We do. In the first two notes, something I learned in an NPR segment, Dorothy leaps a full octave between two worlds, Kansas to Oz, black and white to Technicolor. Then circles and yearns, leaps, circles and yearns on the way to the final high note. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies of blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I wish upon
applause. Greta Cornett, 14 cents for Marvin. Woo! Yeah! And I'm going to tell you, talk about last minute. Marge, of course, comes up with these very creative ideas, but at the last minute. So Greta would step right up. Well, that's our show tonight. I've always wanted to say that. If you have any, if you want to talk to any of the storytellers, we're going to hang out for a few minutes, but I know you might be anxious to get home. I do teach sideboard stories once a month at the Art Lab. We gather and we tell 5-minute stories or not. You don't have to. And we give each other feedback, which is just so valuable. It's $10. You got to pay for it. But it's the first Wednesday of every month. I have a flyer over there. Or if you just want to ask me some questions, my card's over there. Or you can call me, whatever. But I'm going to tell you, this has been really fun, and I hope you had a good time too. And we get you out here early. I have no idea what time it is. Anyone know? Oh my God, that's awesome. I mean, we always want to do that, right? Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for coming out, and thank Off the Hook Arts for still thinking that they want to do this. So, good night and safe driving.